Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson,
I'm Carson Grubaugh.
and
Thanks for joining
today,
us.
and we are living the line, and today we are joined by our friend Kalyan. Kalyan, how you doing?
How you doing, guys?
Good. Uh,
Great.
Kalyan
Nice
is
to see you again, dude.
I know it's been
Yeah,
a
man.
while.
I love coming on with you guys. I was thinking about it. I do podcasts and everything every once in a while for my art stuff, and the conversations I have with you guys are awesome. So I'm just happy to be here talking about this work, which you sent me a while ago, and I had no experience with AI art, and I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" So I'm happy to be here.
So we've
Well,
infected your brain as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so this conversation, as Kalyan has alluded to here, is tied to the release of Abolition of Man #3. It's the third issue of a five-part series, and so you might be visiting this from our YouTube channel, or you might be visiting this from the QR code in the back of Abolition of Man #3. Either way, welcome, and we are going to have a conversation today that sort of touches on, the issue itself, but also just sort of the general ramifications of AI image generation, let's say. I always feel like I need to put some caveats because the temptation is to start saying AI art, and then we've got to dig a 15-minute hole before we can even get to the next sentence. So,
is it, Callian, is it art?
I think with the way definitions have worked,
Yeah.
even if people don't accept it at this moment, it's art. In 10 years, this is not going to be a question.
yeah, the
Yeah.
question is whether the person who typed a sentence is the artist, or whether the artist is the algorithm. I mean, for me, that's the underlying
Right.
dispute.
Something I've noticed is that different people typing the prompts get different results consistently. And some people, the problem is that you can imitate the results so easily once you see what somebody else did. So it's not like seeing a painter's style and being like, oh, I'm practicing and getting it after, even if you're a first-rate painter, it might take you a while to master that. This is so instantaneous, but it just speaks to everything in human history, I think. I mean, isn't that's the story of human history? I think the shock is, I think nobody in this conversation, growing up at least, ever thought this would happen to us.
Yeah.
Like they
Right.
replaced so many things. How can they replace this?
And the interesting thing, one of the interesting things we haven't really touched on before, is the fact that this is not involving a revolution in computer processing or something. You can do these things on your same desktop computer that's essentially the same speed as it's been for the past 8 years, because processors have stopped developing in the exponential way they were before. The actual revolution is just in computers are like, okay, well, you want me to do that thing? Oh, sure, I'll do that.
Right.
People just didn't know how to ask before. In other words, the algorithm itself, the diffusion aspect of it is the thing that is new, and the machine learning aspect of it. The context that we're setting up here today is Abolition of Man #3. Those of you guys who have read it, so Abolition of Man #1 takes a very complex essay by Mr. C.S. Lewis, and Carson, being the perverse person that he is, fed this into a early version of Midjourney the first week of June, and one line by one line. So the prompt that he gave it is literally the text that you see on the thing. And this is essentially a way to test what type of intelligence does this algorithm actually have? What is the pure response of this? What is the machine's viewpoint, if you will, on this complex essay?
And then, I'm seeing a bunch of people making music videos this way now too. They'll take the lyrics from a song and they'll just use the AI generated and then stitch them all together to make a music video. So not a unique response to the technology at all to put other sentences in there.
Right, but a very interesting experiment essentially. And then when you almost immediately started, oh well, hey, I've got this story that I wrote 20 years ago, about obsolescence, and what do people do in the face of obsolescence. The story in issue 2, the hot tech story, that is essentially this department of people who have continued to work and the work that they do is taking all of the data and synthesizing this data into new data. They they transmute the data into a new form. When you had basically figured out what was going to be in issue 1 and 2 and 4 and 5, you were like, "Hey, Sean, you're going to write the middle one." And
Have
so,
fun.
yeah, exactly. Have fun. I'm not going to give you any notes or any goals. What do I want to accomplish? So
I gave you a whole story to finish.
that's true. Yeah.
Here you go. Finish it up.
So I wrote issue 3, the one that we're talking about today. And I say I wrote it. I mean, Carson polished it after the fact, and we sort of did back and forth integration to make the text work and everything. But and then generated it from there. For the most part, I was trying to engage as a writer with the things that you had already sort of set up and sort of figure out what questions have you given me to sort of run with. And especially given the trajectory of the series and knowing what the next issue was going to be like, I felt like ramping up the tension a little bit would be part of the experience, but also just sort of the tension that I was feeling at that point. You did this C.S. Lewis issue in 2 or 3 days, and it was unnerving to read it, but it was also exciting at that point, right? But by the time you'd already done the first 4 issues, I think both of us were like, "What the fuck are we heading towards? What is this thing? And what is this actually going to be?" And so issue 3, I think, has some of the kind of culminating anxiety that maybe both of us sort of feeling at the time. I'm talking an awful lot here.
Well, I mean, you wrote it, and there's a, I mean, before we go into the general discussion, I had said, "Oh yeah, issue 2 is based on something I wrote when I was like 22." And then when we were at San Diego Comic-Con for the Eisners, you told me that your issue 3 was based in a story you wrote about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool that we had both written something that had these kind of premonitions built into them.
Right.
And then I'll be curious to hear also, like, how fresh this all feels to Kalyan, or if it's stuff that because Kalyan's art as well, you're already kind of doing what the AI is doing in a sense of like the mashups. So I wonder how much of this is familiar with you as well.
I'll say I had seen a little bit of AI stuff, maybe when you first showed me. That was maybe around the time I first started seeing it, when you talked to me the first time. And then you sent me the first 5 issues. I think you sent me all 5.
Mm-hmm.
I've only read the first 3. The first issue is the most uncomfortable thing I've ever looked at in my life. I genuinely felt uncomfortable reading it. And I really cannot tell you why. Whether it's just the abstraction of the faces, where there's so uncanny valley, but actually issue 3, just on a visual level, is really pleasant. It's beautiful. And I'm wondering whether there was some change in your thought process around how you generated the prompts, or how you did it. Because the first one, I'm telling you, I've never felt so uncomfortable about reading a comic in my life. I genuinely didn't even want to read it anymore after like page 3. That's how bad it was, just from looking at it. But I didn't feel at issue 2, I stopped feeling that way.
So wait until you see issue 4. Issue 4 is by far, it's like I told Sean when I got the script, because we had an AI generate the script, and I said, "Dude, I think we're gonna get arrested if this script, if what is being described in the script, the visuals are as grotesque as I know they can be. This is gonna be illegal." And it didn't get as bad as I thought, because Midjourney puts constraints on it. So like when it was describing like young naked men being beaten, like I couldn't type that in. I had to mess with the words, and so the issue's been tamed down. But I think that visceral response you had will be even worse for issue 4.
Well, it definitely part of the response for me. And so issue 1, there's no attempt at prompting whatsoever, and so everything is native response. And so I think part of it is this feeling of communication, that there's this alien intelligence that is talking back to you. you know, because you know that the text is the only thing that was prompted, and so there's a sort of invitation to see the intelligence on the other side of it. Whereas you're right. I mean, you know, there's something otherworldly about the art in issue 2 and 3, but it's sort of like friendly otherworldly, you know.
It has a printmaking or drawing quality to it, where maybe it's that familiarity. And the issue 1 doesn't. I mean, I guess it looks like other AI art, which I had no experience with,
right.
but at the time it looked like it was completely grotesque to me. Every panel, and there's no. Also, the fact that there was no continuity between the visuals was really jarring. Something about that made me so uncomfortable, and I never would have predicted it. But now I think, like, what if you drew a comic and you just couldn't make heads or tails of how the visuals were created? Is that what I was reacting to? Even if a person did it, would I still react that way? I don't know. It's very, but like I said, on issue 3, and it made me more comfortable reading the story. Like, as I'm reading issue 3, I feel like some kind of warmth. I can't, I'm trying to describe a feeling which I've never had to compare to what I experienced with issue 1. I've never experienced that before, so I'm trying to contrast something that's very new to me. But there's that familiarity, which maybe I would have read a comic in the past and had that feeling and never thought about it. Like, yeah, that's what you experience. I don't know. It's such new ground for me to. It makes me wonder whether I must have it in my mind when I'm reading, say, Cerebus. Oh, this was drawn. That's a beautiful drawing. That's running at all times. It's maybe especially as an artist.
Yeah.
And when I look at this, that's not. It's running in a different way, but I still feel comfortable looking at it.
Yeah, there's little details like I described the guy and Jasper, the main character in issue 2 and 3. I had described Jasper's boss as having a caterpillar mustache, just because, like, my limited office experiences, you know, there's always that guy that has like the fuller brush, you know, thing. And when the guy first appears, I mean, I assume that Carson literally said, you know, man has a caterpillar mustache, but he's like, he's got this like big old, you know, giant, like literal caterpillar hanging on his face. And it just, you know, there's something so friendly about him. All of the exaggeration to the pose, you know, like there's a certain kind of like vividness, even though the hands have that same kind of, you know, malformed thing, like they've got this vividness to the movement. Yeah, it's really aesthetically unique and beautiful. It kind of feels like Kathy Kolowitz, and like, I don't know, like somebody like Jeffrey Brown or somebody, you know, like
let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Having written this and having seen the other issues first, did you approach the writing differently than you would have if you were just what was your mindset going into it?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and I imagine this is very similar to Carson's response to the second issue. It's weird because, you know, as a cartoonist, I'm visualizing probably about a third of what it is that I'm writing. And I would say when I'm writing a script, just based on the doodles that I do while I'm writing something freehand, about a third of it I'm picturing in advance, you know, and so it was completely disorienting to actually see it. And it kind of helped that the style is so different because it wiped away the previous visualizations I had. So that was I tried to sort of ignore the fact that it was going to be produced. I sort of pretended that Carson was going to draw it, you know? For better and for worse too.
Yeah, and I had offered, I said, you wrote it. Do you want to, like, there's no reason I need to enter the prompts. Like, do you want to enter the prompts? Like, the main thing is the way I got that particular look is at the end of everything. I just said pen and ink, black and white. And that's how it got that weird Kathy Kolowitz thing. So that was all it was that skewed it. And it stays consistent. Like, it's a visually consistent style throughout. So like Sean
very remarkably consistent, if that's all you had to type. I mean, it's
well, and I don't think it would do the same thing now. I mean, it would look completely different now. So part of the reason that it looks like this way is because it's broken. So Midjourney had so little training on real pen and ink drawings that all of these are essentially like trained from low resolution you know, Victorian era woodcut, like with some of the images came back with watermarks on them, like fake watermarks, because
Oh, that's amazing.
you know, the training period had all these watermarks. They all have like this shitty, you know, you could see the edge of the image, and you know, they're all like a certain color, like unadjusted, like yellowed paper. You know, every businessman, quote unquote businessman, has a cravat and like early Edwardian top hat, or late Victorian top hat, you know, and overcoat.
Well, and I think you leaned into that with your dialogue in
Right.
a way that I didn't. Like
Yeah.
Sean picked up on that and ran with the Victorian vibe.
Yeah, in terms of just everybody having a slightly more stylized, you know, verbal acuity and everything. But yeah, the actual, like, you know, I feel like I don't want to spoiler. I mean, you read this, right? If you're watching the video, you've read the comic.
Yeah, supposedly.
Supposedly, yeah. You know, the character that Carson had written in the second issue, Jasper, who works at this place, Hodtech, is essentially doing these things, you know, that are rewarding for his coworkers, you know, instead of just taking the money that they get from whatever government, you know, they live under. They go into work and they get this data on their desk and they process this data in some unique kind of way. And Carson's, you know, ended on a sort of light, you know, note, but I wanted to sort of ramp it up a little bit, and maybe because you named the character Jasper, my son's name is Jasper. I kind of felt a little bit of identification with him, and felt like sort of a duty to him to sort of get him out of this situation. You know, it's not super clear in the first issue, but he seems very unsatisfied, as opposed to his sort of coworkers who all seem like this is a situation that they want to be in. And so I started thinking about what the other options would be for somebody in this society, and sent a few texts with Carson, and decided that, you know, there would probably be other options for people. You imagine a society in which everything is automated. You know, my first my first thoughts about this were probably formed by the Philip Dick story Autofac. You know, Dick his formative experiences were in a time where factories were really large, and you know, there was this promise of the future where everything was going to be like the housewife's dream, you know, the idea of like the microwave and the tentacle arms that come out and do your dishes and all that type of stuff, you know. And so Philip Dick wrote the story called Autofac, and he used the concept over and over again after this. But essentially, Autofac is about a person living in this hellish landscape where there's basically like 5 factories, and all of the factories make like either teddy bears or these like vague appliances, and they essentially fight each other. They've just gone amok. There's so many of them that they're at war with each other, you know. And Autofac was really like, when I read this in high school first time, it was really chilling to me, and it really kind of informed that. And it gave me some, you know, pause, like, what is it that we would do when all of these things are taken care of for us? And, you know, I think if you're a younger person now, if you're listening to this right now and you're 20, 21, you might sort of think that these things just came out of nowhere. But even though these technologies are surprising, I think that this is a general trend over a 20, 30-year period. And definitely the first time I really, really sat down to think about that was a short story I wrote called, I think the title was probably why it didn't sell. I Put My Hand in the Fucking Trash Hole, I think was the name of it.
What did you find in the trash hole?
Right. Well, the trash hole is garbage disposal. Yeah. And it was essentially like a very short story that I wrote when I was like 20 years old, about a person who essentially lives in like a dorm situation with the other people who are still around with them. And one day they are in violation of the things that they're supposed to be doing by grinding their own hand in a garbage disposal. And when they do this thing to like break free from like the relentless monotony, essentially they're reprimanded by these robots that are there to, you know, facilitate them continuing to live. And this is like an affront to humanity for them to self-harm, you know. Yeah. essentially they're given these different options, and one of the options in the story was that they could go be on this build team. And the end of the story is him being carried away by these robots while you can see all of the things that the construction team is building, which is like a Jimi Hendrix statue and a Janis Joplin statue and like a Beatles, like all four of the Beatles statue and a giant Buffy the Vampire Slayer in the center. Just sort of like the cynical idea that, at 20 years old, I'd already seen a few pop culture rehashes enough to think these things, we might just be stuck with these things forever. 1,000 years from now, people might still be like rehashing, like essentially like the Beatles as Homeric Odyssey, that we're stuck with the stories that we have now for various commercial reasons, and that building giant statues to these people would be a natural thing for people to do when they've run out of actual things to do. And so having Jasper as a character have the option to essentially go and work outside all day seemed like a nice alternative to, the data management that he felt himself kind of trapped in.
Yeah, and it really speaks to a lot of my thoughts around AI, because I view the human existence as by mistake us removing ourselves from our humanity bit by bit.
Yeah.
And what a remarkable place in history we're at right now, where, I mean, the three of us are here having this conversation, and to some extent, each of the three of us have embraced this technology in some way. Maybe it's like the devil's work, for lack of a better way of looking at it, what we're doing, and it's completely altruistic the way we're approaching it. We're just like, this is interesting, it exists, let's explore it. We don't have very good feelings about the technology necessarily, but let's think about the ramifications of it and explore it. And maybe that's all it takes, is that attitude to have everything go down the toilet.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. The Luddites literally got their sledgehammers and went and tried to smash the machine, right? So what are we doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think I think there's a few things going on. One, as creative people, we're all like, should be super open-minded. So
Yeah.
you see a new thing and you're like the creative tendency is, even if you think it's a bad thing, like my gut instinct about the AI is, this is largely going to lead to a lot of really bad things that I don't want to engage with.
Yeah.
But like the way of being able to express that is like, you have to go use it and you have to make something creative. Like that's how a creative person sorts out what they think about something. The other thing is, like, me and Sean, at least, the first time we saw one image and I sent it to Sean, it was like, people are going to start making comics with this. There's going to be a boatload of them. And I just saw, like, I don't know if you've even had a chance to look through it, Sean, but there's some like 250-page magazine or something that we're included in now that has like maybe 6 pages of one of the issues in it or something. I thought it was a magazine about AI art. What I didn't realize is it's pretty much just an anthology of AI comics. And
Yeah.
like,
Oh, wow.
like that many of them. And we kind of knew there was a tsunami of these things coming, and it was like, okay, we hate this, we don't want it there, but if it's coming, we might as well try and profit from it a little bit. It's going to happen anyways. And in profiting from it, can it be like an opening salvo to get like the conversation steered in the right direction, at least? But you're always running the risk of, like, now you're forever tied to it, and you're potentially forever tied to it becoming more popular. You can potentially shooting yourself in the foot.
Well,
Yeah.
it's hard to say. I mean, the Jasper solution is to go outside and turn off your fucking computer, and you're not forever tied to bullshit. I mean, I'm not tied to anything. If I walk down to the grocery store, nobody knows who the fuck I am. If I go to the 7-Eleven You know, perhaps an earthier example would be better. I can go outside and roll around in the fall leaves, and not engage, choose not to engage for now.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm in the position where I can do something different, and I wouldn't necessarily be in that. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird thing.
I always wonder this eternal question about whether there's any moral higher ground to taking yourself out of the equation of society's trajectory. Whether all these people go off and live in the woods and do nothing, actually have a leg to stand on, like, or is it just like from the perspective, from a broader perspective, like one ant wandering off and being like, you know, I'm not doing this whole ant thing. I'm gonna stand over here, and we're just like, well, there's a fucking ant. Who gives a shit? Like, is it like, does it matter? Or, and is it just good for our soul? Is it in the end just selfish to do that?
Yeah.
Because we're like, well, I feel good, even if everybody else is like living in this hellscape. I'm living off the land or whatever it is. No, like it's, and this is just another example of it. Like, if we don't jump into this, is there a moral high ground? Not really. Like, is there a moral high ground against a tsunami when you're a puddle? Like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you can remove like a moral question from it altogether, depending on what kind of level of abstraction you go to, right? Like you said, when you're
Right.
up at the looking at the ants, it's just like behavior. There's no long-term
Right.
consequence. And the idea that the human species has to persist, like, I mean, that's just a kind of biological urge of some. I mean, I don't particularly feel that urge myself, so
Yeah.
you know, I don't even look at it that way. It is selfish. It's like this is headed towards a world that is distressing to me,
Yeah.
in particular.
Well, and I my attempt anyway was to make Pranay and issue 3 a sort of lunatic extreme of that sort of we can do it, so we should type of attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, not to make it a little bit too, not to make it too political. When we were part of the article that was in Forbes about all these different things, and you know, we had a very heartfelt interview with Rob, who put together that article, and then to see the response from the guy who's actually responsible for putting together Midjourney, and just seeing the dismissive attitude about the entire thing is like, well, I'm bringing something, you know, it's just all like airy fairy, like giving art to the artless, instead of like upending you know, thousands of years of human art making by seeing
I always think I'm sure you guys have run into this person before, because there's an endless stream of them. The person says, man, I have so many good ideas. Like, if I could just get it out there, people would be amazed by my ideas. Like, maybe you could do some of my ideas. That's always the next step.
Yeah.
But the thing I always tell those people is, well, then you don't have any good ideas. Because once you put the pen to the paper, you're shocked at what the fuck happens. It's never, if you sit there and dream all night, like, I'm going to make this and it's going to be exactly like this, it never is that. It doesn't matter who you are. There's always some human experience that happens during creation where it ends up being somewhat sublime. You think, even if you hate it, you say, oh, I didn't really expect this.
Yeah.
And this does that for you. So that idiot who's like, I thought about my ideas could get them out there. See, that's my idea. And it even did some things I didn't even expect. It made the unexpected for him, and it made his idea for him. It truly is art for the artless. And it's in removing the process, for lack of a better way of putting it. I don't even mean this religiously. It's removing God from the picture. That's the whole thing, is the process.
Right.
And I think, whether it be with food or whatever else we've removed from our daily process, who knows what we're missing, and nobody will know in the future what we know right now. And they'll look at this conversation right now and say, those fucking old fogies, like, whatever, man.
The best thing anyone has said to me so far is my buddy Levi, and I don't know if I mentioned this on another video or not, but he told me this is the Industrial Revolution for artists.
Yeah.
And my first response was like, yeah, but no one wanted to do fucking farming. Like, everyone wants to do art. And he said, no. Like, if you go back to when these tools were first coming, their entire identity, their sense of worth, their kind of spiritual worldview was all tied up. I mean, it was hard work, but they found real value in that. And they would have been making the same argument that you were making, is that you were stripping them of their human value by getting a John Deere. And
Yeah.
you were like taking something out of the value of the food. And I
And
was
it's
like,
true.
I said,
Yeah,
you know
it's
what?
true.
You're right. You're 100% like, actually, you're right. You're 100% right. And this is the Industrial Revolution for artists.
I know that I said this, I don't think it made the cut for the interview, but I know I said this to Rob as well, that, you know, you look at what these tech billionaires do when they decide to quote unquote retire. What do they do spending their time with? They go and they lift weights, they have a personal trainer, and they garden. They do the things that we supposedly all have been trying to get away from for more than 2 centuries, right? You do something with your body, and you do something with the earth, or they learn how to watercolor, right?
Right.
It's like you could argue, and you know, maybe I wouldn't have seen this before 6 months ago or something, but you could argue that the essentially technological progress for 250 years has been about making us less human continually, and bringing us away from the things that gave us pleasure over the long, I mean, it's got to have been thousands of years. I mean,
One wonders whether when somebody first figured out agriculture, they said, look, we can just stay here, and at least 70% of our food comes from right there. We just take care of it. People are like, yeah, but that takes away like our whole lifestyle.
right.
Like, look, we go out, we look for we're together, like we do all these things. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, we don't know if we're going to make it, but that's what makes us alive. And like, yeah, but this is so much easier. Like that conversation, did that conversation happen tens of thousands of years ago?
For sure. Because like what we're saying
is, what to this goat?
Well, that depends on what part of the world you're in, what people do with their goats. But yeah, Kalyan, I think you're right, because we keep saying, oh, it's all about the process. It's about the journey. That's what they would have said. Like,
that's what they would have said.
Yeah, and I'm looking. I don't know if you've watched the new Ring of Power show, but like the hobbits in that they're a vagabond people. They haven't settled into Hobbit Town yet. They're the wandering caravan.
Right.
And they have an ethic built around that, and that's their lifestyle. And I'm curious to see, like, because I think the show's really well written. Like they don't call them hobbits, they're Harfoots, and you can tell that came from like Harefoots. So there's like an etymology of how you got to Hobbit, and I'm really curious to see how they do, like, what is the historical reason within that story why they settled. And I'm curious now that you brought that up, like how similar of an answer will it be to the expediency of settling.
It seems like the argument is always an argument from either expediency or ease of some other kind, you know?
Yeah.
And certainly you can imagine that there's a certain kind of elegance to, well, keep the cow here, and you know, don't move. but you're absolutely right. You look at you know, this is one of those things that I feel like is easy to see as a parent, because you have kids who are essentially like punished from an early age for wanting to wander, or wanting to follow, or wanting to throw sticks at things. You know, you have all of these things that you have to assume are natural activities, natural in the purest sense of like, this is the thing that we want to do. And the framework that we have right now denies you that experience from an early age in every way possible, and you know, is going to continue to deny that, especially if somebody takes a job and that, you know, they're actually in one of these environments that we're sort of like describing right now, you know, working from an office or working from your interior office and broadcasting yourself out into the larger office. I mean, yeah.
You know, I think the people starting with whenever it started and moving on to us, I think and I'll preface this by saying that as in my art practice from the beginning, I always embraced, okay, I have to live in this world in order to respond to it. So, and even things I don't like, I'm going to look right at them and go into them. So for me, the AI art thing is horrifying I'm going directly into it. That's where I have to go. But I think having this conversation about, well, maybe this isn't the greatest, I think that side of the conversation has always been right, is the amazing thing. Because if you look at humanity now, and we're dealing with this acceleration of technology, right? If you look at humanity now, so many people are incredibly unhappy. So our life is ridiculously easy, yet people have to cope with it by taking large amounts of antidepressants and this and that and the third, and they have this disorder, and we're seeing heightened suicide among children and all these things. And you have to point it directly to how much easier life is getting. Well, I didn't used to have to go home to use the phone. I just had it here, and I can just look up the directions, and whatever the initial thought was behind making things easier is not making it objectively better for anybody. I think we all agree on that, but here we are at another crossroads where, again, people are saying this might not be great. And what kind of craziness is going to come out of this from just the human species? How mentally unstable are we going to be in 30 years?
Well, it's such a weird equation there, because you also want to say, look, we've all got air conditioning, we got clean, like not everyone, but like the world in general, medicine, all of that, like we want to say all of this technological progress has made our lives better. But I think you're right. Like everyone's on an SRSRI, or everyone's taking Adderall. I mean, Sean, like you just said, those kids, they want to run out and play. They don't have ADHD. They're just like a young boy that's 7, right? Like real Jasper. By the way, the reason that character's name's Jasper is because that was the name I wrote 20 years ago. So it's just a coinky-dink. And I know Sean's kids' names, and I said, well, that's weird, but should I change it just because of that? No, I'll go ahead and leave it. And I'm glad that gave you some affinity to treat the character nice. But you're watching your kid. Does he have ADD, or is he just a normal 7-year-old? Like, does he need Adderall?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. And when I look at the difference between the way that, for instance, his teacher treated him last year and the way his teacher treated him this year, the difference does not seem to be his behavior. The difference seems to be the reasonable expectations of the teacher. And the one last year was essentially like, I should be teaching high school. All these people need to, wow, wait, got up? And I had a conference, and she would be like, he got up out of his seat. He wants to talk to me all the time. It's like, yes, he does. He's also 6.
Yeah, that's to be expected.
You're an interesting person in the room who knows lots of things. You should be encouraging him talking to you.
Yeah. I find myself walking this line with my kid. He, they're all different, but my one is having like problems with paying it. Like, he doesn't give a shit. Like, he's getting fine grades, A's and B's, but then he'll like get 3 D's in a row on tests. And I'm like, dude, please. Like, and I'm finding myself walking this line as a parent of knowing that it's because who gives a shit? Like, it's not, the subject matter isn't even interesting.
Right.
It's not like I can tell him, dude, world history is fascinating. Like,
and
I know he's going there in the class, and it's just nonsense in the class. Like, it's just nonsense. And I find myself trying to figure out how to get across to him, like, because I don't want to be a machine either.
Yeah.
So where do you go with that? So you have to like create this perspective, like, of all those things. And I don't know why like that occurred to me, but
yeah, it's, I mean, we get on tangents because these things are related. And I definitely think that for me, this revolution in machine learning is essentially a opportunity for an inflection point to just say, like, is the general direction that we have sustainable? Is this something that we actually want to live in? And as you say, like, can we be the ant and opt out of some percentage of it? I mean, I'm sort of maintaining that I can, but that's just because every time I get anxious, I'm just like, well, I can just quit it all. And it happens to be true for me.
Right.
But that's because I can go be a private music teacher by, clicking a few buttons, and then I'm ready to do it, as long as that's a job. Right. I mean,
right.
Or whatever, But you know, obviously that's a privileged position to be in, economically privileged position to be in, to be able to just stop doing the thing that you're doing. And certainly, it's a lot harder to opt out if your connections with your work and your livelihood and the way that you provide for your family or whatever are entirely dependent on being part of this world that takes so much of your attention and gives you so little in return. We talked with John Mahoney last week for a discussion about issue 4, and you know, give you guys a little preview. John is much more positive than Carson and I about these technologies. But one of the things that sort of came up in the discussion was the reward aspect of all these things. When you sit down and make a prompt, you have an instantaneous, almost instantaneous reward that encourages you to feel accomplishment, as if you yourself have done it. It almost feels like it's like Farmville for wannabe artists, you know, or you know, take it back a little further, Tamagotchi or something, you know, before people, you know, held quote unquote smartphones, you held a little chia pet, essentially, that beeped at you when you were neglecting it, right? How do you get away from that? I mean, Kalyan, you know, your paintings take what, 200 hours, 300 hours?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what incentive do you have? Would young Kalyan have to do a 200 or 300 hour painting if you could generate imagery similar to that with a few sentences?
I've been debating whether I should say this, and I've decided I'm talking to you guys about this topic, so I'm gonna just say it.
Okay.
But I was a couple of weeks ago that Korean artist Kim Jung-gi, I don't know how you say his name, passed away, the cartoonist.
Yeah.
47 years old, brilliant artist. 3 days later, a guy with 200 Twitter followers had built an add-on to Stable Journey that would allow you to create that guy's work with AI. And so this guy with 200 Twitter followers all of a sudden has 10,000 comments on his tweet of people losing their mind, like what an asshole he is, right? Like nobody was complimentary of this. I thought it was, now I can't comment on him doing it for another artist. That's an ethical question that is beyond me. I think that we have to accept that that's going to happen. That's the way it's going to go. But my first thought was, I fucking love that. So what I'm going to do is, since I'm quitting painting, I'm building an AI that's going to make my fucking paintings, and anybody can just do me. Like, have at it. I think it's great.
Well, and I think you making that choice, like because there's something like that's an art piece in and of itself. Like you're figuring out how to train this thing to do you. And it'll be interesting because one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you in specific is I think your paintings, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a premonition of this built into your paintings because of the way you mash up visual history. It's just you put them next to each other instead of like mixing them in the blender.
I'm a little surprised at where I'm at in this moment, because many people have said that to me, and there's some truth to it. That's not what I'm thinking about, clearly, but it's the same thing. And I'm wondering, and a lot of that came from, it's a product of being able to see the internet. Even 100 years ago, it'd be so hard to do something like that because you'd have to go to a museum and say, okay, I'm going to do this style, I'm going to do that. And now it's so easy to get a book and like try to figure out from the little picture what it looks like and everything. But now it's so easy. And really, it is the same process as the AI. I'm surprised that I'm in this moment doing essentially the same thing the AI is doing, which is looking at everything and putting it together, because we see everything every day. It was obvious, and the AI, it's obvious to them too. I don't know what to say about it. I don't consider I don't know. I don't think I did, you know what I mean? I just did a thing.
Yeah.
It's weird that it's obvious that AI would do this. But I hadn't thought about it beforehand.
I think that's in the previous discussions that we've had with you. The thing that blows me away is every time I push on like what you're up to, your answer was kind of always like, I just go with intuition. And
Yeah.
that has put you in this spot where you're quitting painting. Like you announced at the beginning of 2022, I'm done at the end of the year. And like, what a more perfect time to come up and like, you've posted some images that look like you're recreating the stuff that the AI's made. And like,
Yeah, I
what
am.
better way to like leave painting? Like you picked your intuition on that's insane.
I feel there's something was pushing him in that direction for a while. I don't know. The world is a bizarre place to live in right now. The first thing was shocked me was the NFT thing. I was shocked by that now we can have unique things on the internet. Even if you take a screenshot of it, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And this so rapidly happened after, it makes me wonder, the AI revolution so rapidly happened after that. It makes me wonder, in 2026, is there going to be some other fucking thing? Like, how much can change?
Well,
like,
yeah. And I mean, I don't want to fuck with your head here. So I apologize in advance. Cover your ears if you want, or take off your headphones.
No, I'm ready.
Human beings are not the only things that can make prompts. And each of these systems connected together is the thing. And it's not going to be 4 years from now. There's going to be
it's going to be next year.
No, I mean, I don't know why it's not today already. Like, I mean, I basically did that with issue 4. I had an AI generated story and then I put it, but to link up a story generator and an image generator and have it pump something out. Like, I mean, I don't know.
An emotion generator. And Carson sent me right before I went to sleep, which is, thank you, Carson. I had nightmares all night with a early release AI for animation that essentially can make a skeletal, frame and fully render from video it's supplied with, or from text prompts.
It can create a fully 3D model based on what it's learned, and then it's starting to learn movement patterns. So you could say like a guy skipping across a crosswalk, and it has all those models, and then it can apply the movement. So you'll get I think within the next couple of months you'll have rudimentary, if not already. I just don't know.
So sure, they'll be able to put the musculature on top of the skeleton, and the skin on top of that, and the hair. Right. And then Pixar's done. Like, that's the end of them. Like,
anybody, everybody. Game development. I mean, there is no end to it. Once you realize that, like, let's table the date for a second, right? Let's just put future date.
Yeah.
Let's say that it's
15 years.
Really Carson long. Grubaugh. Okay, well, an anonymous person. Okay, Carson Grubaugh is going to come home. Carson Grubaugh is going to come home from a long day at work, and he's going to entertain himself. And so Carson Grubaugh goes to his Google entertainment system, and he says that he wants to hear a new Bruce Springsteen song about the development that's happening down the street that he's really irritated about. And he wants Bruce to sing it to him. And he wants Bruce to be 1983 Bruce. And he's got to have the American flag in his back pocket. And then after that, Bruce is going to go on a date with the Courtney Cox, who was in the audience. And he will sit down, and all of those things will happen in a matter of minutes. And the amount of time that it takes you to make your popcorn, you will have that for you. Sorry, Carson Grubaugh will have that.
Carson Grubaugh. One thing that's really interesting to me is that AI can learn, and it must be able to learn what is going to, like you touched on, what's going to create human emotion. So will I, in that 15 years time, will you be able to say, oh, I want to watch a movie and I want to cry at the end of it? And how much will this minimize the human experience of emotion, even where people say, oh yeah, dude, I haven't felt anything in years. I have to take this drug just to fucking feel. Cause I after binging like the Cry series for 3 weeks straight, I just don't feel shit anymore. Like, will it be able to be like that? Like, oh my God, I feel so much all the time until you're like, well, I don't experience that. Because it's already happening. We already have these people
Oh
who
yeah.
they don't really have emotional connection to anything. And I can't imagine that's a natural state when people are living out hunter-gatherers. They're like, oh, I don't have feelings about this. Like, it's developed. Like, will that develop even further? It's amazing.
Well, and I think you see that in the language. Like I saw an article the other day about how we've like I think you even said something on your story the other day of I'm sick of seeing the word genius thrown around.
Yeah.
The article was
Legend.
about awesome and amazing and wonderful, you know, how those words have been abused to the point of like awesome should mean like it has staggered me with awe, like I have dropped to my knees in awe, or like that's sublime, or that's wonderful, like I am filled with wonder, or like terrible, you know, like I think we've already diminished those things.
I think that's a Louis C.K. bit from like 15 years ago. He talks about hilarious.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I was standing next to these two people in line, and they're like, I saw Linda. That's hilarious. He's like, that's hilarious. Like,
and if you I always think about this in relationship to one of my relative-in-laws who is a composer who works in Hollywood, and he is all about button pushing, in the sense that when the director is asking him for something to be sad, he knows what buttons to push, and the only variation is what's already happened and the like tone of the movie, like what instrumentation have we already allowed in, and he makes the sad sound, as opposed to somebody like me who, when I used to do plays, I would do the write music for plays, and I once had an actress ask me, this is supposed to be a sad monologue, but you're not playing sad music when I'm doing it. Will you tell me about that? And I was doing the wrong thing, right? Because I was creating ambiguity. Whereas there's a whole swath of people who, what they want is they want to have everything doing the same thing at all times. And you got to imagine that you're also going to be able to ask for that too. That Garson's AI is going to know that Garson is a distinguished fellow who is going to want some ambiguity in all the different sensory inputs, and so Garson's going to get a slightly different like soundtrack to his Bruce Springsteen, Courtney Cox fantasy date than somebody who is like all in, whole hog, like I want to have the strings swell at the appropriate moment.
I wonder if listening to this back in 20 years, people will be like, what a bunch of maroons.
I hope so. I hope we're wrong.
Yeah, like they thought this was going to get so out of hand and it never got near there. But I don't,
remember AI?
Yeah.
No, I don't. Oh yeah, like 2022.
Yeah, like Angry Birds, right?
Like
I mean, because
MySpace.
there is a game sense to using it. Like every little idea, you're just, trying to go to bed and you're like, yeah, but what if it was like a wiener dog made out of hot dogs? And then you like roll over and type it and like, ha ha ha, it has that. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm a real artist, I've won some awards, we've published some books. Like I use it in the same way that you're talking about people use Farmville, I still, there's a gamified nature to it. So it could be a passing fad that people get sick of, but that just seems
very unlikely.
Because there's money behind this.
Tons. And it's not going to be what we're looking at. It's going to be some variation of what we're saying. Yeah. It's going to be an entire life experience.
And 2042, if we're all lucky enough to be still people are interested in this, and it's not just the sea of quote unquote content that you're just drowning in everything. I mean, I will consider myself very fortunate, B, very fortunate if I'm still alive and not imprisoned. But yeah, I don't know what this conversation is gonna look like. It's hard to imagine. I mean, predictions in general don't have a great track record, right?
No. Maybe it'll move away from content. Maybe we're in content right now, and it's going to move towards experience. Like right now, we expect life to give us experience. When we think about experience, we think about going to a concert or a trip, and we think about content, we think about movies and music. So we're still on the wrong tip. We're thinking about, think about all the content that's going to generate, and maybe it'll become experience, and experience will become linked to content invariably because it'll come from an AI, but it'll be all about the experience. Maybe it'll all be in headsets, and we'll go and it'll just be a world, and we won't, and we're imagining we're going to say things to it. And that's so short-sighted because it'll just know us anyway. Like people in the future will be like, why would I ever say anything to this fucking thing? It knows what I want.
Yeah.
Like, it's reading my pulse rate. It knows I want to see this. Like, that's it.
I think there will be an intermediary step where people are entering the prompts. And the other thing about this is, like, as soon as you engage with it, you're part of training it.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you use it, you're part of training it. So I think there will be a training phase. Like, I can see this scaling in ways like where, yeah, it's learning about people, and then they have to enter the prompts first, and we can come home and generate that movie that you're talking about, and you can tell it I have 38 minutes or I have the weekend, and it's going to generate the same story at different lengths, particularly for you. And then, yeah, over time, that's all input, that's all data that goes into the neural network, and who knows. But like Shin Lede, who I talked to, he was talking about, we also don't know what backend they're going to be programming in. So someone wants to sell polka dot t-shirts, you just go in and you program on the algorithm. Well, 70% of the time the t-shirts are going to have polka dots, you know. So like the
People
monetary,
will be like, that's a good style. Yeah.
Yeah, but like the seriousness of, like, well, already, like, our Instagram feeds are so tailored, and already our YouTube, I can't get out of the loop, you know, like,
Yeah.
they're
I just type
already
World
watching
Star
this.
just to get the fuck out of all the stuff I'm watching. So give anything else.
Well, Carson and I share a YouTube login so that we can both do stuff on there, and it's very interesting to be like, what is this, something Carson's watching? Like, you know, YouTube thinks that both of us are really into MMA and
Wow.
you know, like bikini fail videos. No,
I don't know where that came from.
no.
That must be you. The MMA is me, the heavy metal.
I have a question for you guys. I was thinking about it since you were saying, like, you guys are at the beginning stages. Abolition Amanda is so early in the process of AI comics, and even maybe AI in general, because it's learning even still. It makes me wonder whether in 5-10 years they're going to do an archaeological look at why did things look this way with AI now, and if you'll be part of the DNA of that. Oh yeah, 5% was actually from Abolition of Man. Like, look, they did it like this, and that's why you see this type of imagery. Like, I wonder if you'll be in that DNA. That'd be incredible.
I doubt it, because like, we're not the artists that, like, it's going to be the guys who's Kim Jong-ji and Dave McKean and that whoever that guy, I forget his name because I'm not familiar with him, that Rob was talking about, who's like the guy that's been, he had his name used like 10,000 times.
Oh yeah, the guy who does like dragons and stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff. I mean, basically, like, if you can imagine the average Reddit user, they are going to be the taste drivers of all of the publicly available.
Tell me what you think about this. I guess my take on myself is clear, but that guy is the guy with the 10 whatever million people are using his name. He's really upset about it, but I really don't understand why. It's like,
well, he views it as potential competition. Like, if something else
isn't he a painter though, or no?
Yeah,
he's
but
like
he's
a
a commercial painter, so he'll paint for Magic the Gathering or something.
So now they can just generate his stuff for free.
Yeah,
that is the idea. Yeah, and frankly, I mean, I think a lot of those, the type of commercial art job that I do is the thing that is basically already going away, which is the low hanging fruit. You know, I do stuff like the stuff that I do as a freelancer is like a $100 job or a $200 job or a $250 job. Those are people who, you know, good enough is what they're looking for. Not that I necessarily personally do good enough work. Hopefully they actually want the thing that I want, but they can get an approximation of whatever it was they were looking for from me for free now.
Right.
You know, if you're Greg Rudowski, I mean, you have to think that the Wizards of the Coast people are like, well, I'm not going to pay him $3,000 to make a dragon flaming a rock or whatever. Like we can just do that for half an hour over here in the office now.
And we can use his name. We can use his name so it looks like him. So of course he thinks it's competition, and it can do it in 5 seconds, and you can get 10,000 of them a day, and you can pick the best one. So like, of course he's scared. Sean's, at least you're like doing an actual watercolor. It's not something that's intended for reproduction. These people, even if they're painting with oil and it's intended for reproduction, like, who gives a fuck if there's an original? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're screwed.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that that's the thing I'm holding tight to, is that there, at least right now, there's a generation of people who still value the fact that they have an original. So, like I do a painting for somebody that's going to hang in their house, that's one thing. If I do a painting for somebody that's going to appear on their website, I mean,
it's a question whether because the high end always kind of wants, like you see it, farm to table. Like that should be the way everything fucking is. That's how it's been. Like, like now it's like, well, we're paying a lot of money for that, or so. Like, I wonder if the high end will always, even though AI will infiltrate it the same way digital art and every new cinema, everything has infiltrated the high end and found its own place there. Whether there'll always be a place for those things in the top end of the market.
Yeah.
Like in 100 years, there'll still be people like, I have an oil painting by this guy.
What's your sense? Because you're involved in the gallery scene in LA, which is, one of the top gallery scenes in the world at the moment. And you're involved in the NFT stuff, which kind of has that same, at least in the NFTs there. And I'm sure the AI stuff's attached to the NFTs already now. People.
Yeah.
But I also imagine it's diminishing the NFT by just flooding it with images. But is there a sense among the collectors and stuff that you have dealt with that they still prefer that physical thing?
I haven't heard in the physical world, I haven't heard a word about AI. Not a word. I'm sure that there's like this project that I'm going to do where I make an AI myself, that'll be looked at as a fine art project.
Yeah.
And probably be accepted as that. But as far as selling and some artists are going to make it big making AI stuff, but there's going to have to always be some element of themselves in it. Like they're going to have to, like, some kind of tongue in cheek about it. In the same way that maybe Warhol was tongue in cheek about making these things as a production line. Like he's looking at it from the outside in a way.
Yeah.
That's going to have to exist in order to take it to the next level. The concept is always going to have to be there, I think, for it to get to the top. At least some semblance of concept. It's not like people in the fine art market are a bunch of geniuses. They're retards like everybody else. But there'll have to be some reason, is what I'm thinking. I don't know.
It's interesting.
I don't know if we're going to solve the world's problems here. Carson, what's that?
Oh, can you not hear me?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, I hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, my headphones died. They've been doing that lately. You're not hearing yourself through the.
Nope.
Okay. When you're talking about like programming an AI to do I think you're correct. That's like an art project, and there's a real like precedent for that. We haven't talked about this at all, by the way, but for people who don't know and who are just getting into AI and generative art, this isn't new. This has been going on since the 60s. There's a group of artists called the Algorists that go back a long time. Roman Vorotsko and I'm going to blank on a lot of the names. There's a guy named Harold Cohen who, starting in the early 70s, I believe, maybe mid to late 70s, but in the 70s started programming an art making AI called Aaron, Aaron. And he actually has it attached to like a plotter printer, and it paints physical paintings. And the algorithms have always argued that the art is their code. And a lot of them will display their code on the wall with the aesthetic results that the machines produce. And they've all, if you look at them, they've all developed things that generate kind of a unique look. Like a Roman Vorotsko versus an Aaron are different. They're identifiable artists. I think that's showing up too. Like DALL-E versus Midjourney look very different if you just input prompts. Stable Diffusion, I haven't played with it enough, but those are also almost unique personalities.
Yeah. what's your take on, first of all, I didn't know any of that, but got me thinking, what is your take on telling the prompt? Is that the art? Because I posted all this stuff to my Instagram. You saw I had 4 different posts, and each of them had 10 images. And people said, "Show us the prompt." And I said, "No, you can look at it on Midjourney. Nobody's going to stop you." But like, I don't post my process for oil painting.
Yeah.
But you know how to do it. It's not like magic. Like, there's ways of doing it. And this is the same thing. Like, you just type in words and you can look and see what the words are. But the image is what was important. But do you think the prompt is as important as the image? Or my take on it was, when I put it there, it's almost like a tutorial, like the interest changes rather than from being about the topic I'm making, it's becoming about how I made it, which is a different conversation.
That might be just because it's early. Also, the first results that you got, I was like, how the hell did this guy get like this is like super photorealistic, like gods that you've got out of it, basically.
Yeah.
And my first response to it was like, how do you get faces that look so good? Like, you know, we got these mashed potato faces and we got made fun of for that, you know. And it was like, well, there's these tricks. And so I think people, one of them that they added after we made the comics is they have this remaster feature, and you just click remaster and all of a sudden like the hands and the faces start to look more like hands and faces. But
yeah, it fixes everything.
There's something about, some people are better at writing the prompts than others. And I think part of why people are asking and sometimes almost demanding to see the prompt is because this is the promise of like democratization of art. So it feels unfair when someone's still getting better results. And it's like, well, how did you do that? Like, we deserve to know.
You're cheating.
Yeah,
well,
but go ahead.
I think that the art is definitely the thing that you displayed. The question is, who's the artist? And I would argue that you are essentially the art director or the writer, and the artist is the platform and algorithm that you were interacting with. I mean, you know, we wouldn't have this conversation if we were talking about like From Hell and somebody said, well, is Alan Moore the artist of From Hell? You know, and it's like, well,
what about Damien Hirst is the artist, but somebody else painted all those dots. Like, it's
true that somebody did, and I think that to say from the studio of is a lot more honest.
Okay,
you know, or Jeff Koons. You know, he's the big one for me. You know, as somebody who just basically has taken Andy Warhol's dictum and run with it.
Right.
But, you know, I'm happy to tell him what I think about his dictum.
Yeah.
Not Andy. Andy can stay.
Well, Sean, Sean, you missed, after you left last time, I pulled up, because this seems related to me, to the AI stuff and the copyright issues that are coming. Have you seen this Supreme Court case about the Andy Warhol?
I have not.
Fascinating.
Okay, Kalyan, can you, I think you've probably read more about it. I think I saw it on your, or you sent it to me.
Yeah, Lynn, what's her name? Gold. She's a famous photographer. Lynn, I forget what her last name is. Anyways, this photographer took a picture of Prince. Now, the intricacies of the case are a little bit lost on me because I think the articles aren't being clear. However, it's something along the lines of, she was commissioned by a magazine to take the photo of Prince. And then the Andy Warhol Foundation was commissioned by somebody, or Andy Warhol was commissioned by somebody else. And he asked her to do it, and he paid her a certain amount of money because it was for editorial.
Okay.
But then unbeknownst to her, he made 16 other versions of it, and they've been on the market and they've sold to a million different people, but they weren't for editorial use. They weren't like in magazines. And she feels like she's owed millions of dollars because he took her copywritten image, but it's done in the style of Warhol. It's a screen print. So, and now the interesting thing to me is I went on her Instagram and there's some pretty heavy hitters. The one I noticed immediately was Patti Smith, because I know she's heavily involved in the art world, saying, go you, to her, like, this is awesome. But to me, I was a little shocked because if we just think about what Andy Warhol is, let's just forget about every other artist that's doing this.
Right.
Doesn't that invalidate his entire portfolio, billions of dollars worth of art, like they're worth nothing.
Like so many
they're not worth
people are, like you're so screwed. You're totally screwed.
I'm totally screwed. Yeah.
Because then it's pushing. This is really strange to me because it's, instead of moving the goalpost further, it's like pulling the goalpost of what counts as copyright infringement closer.
Yeah.
And that's happening at the same time as the AI stuff. Really worries me that the AI stuff is going to be brought up at some point, because like even in that article that Rob wrote, the painter who was worried about losing his job at Wizards of the Coast, Rob brought that up to some correspondent with the White House, and she was like, this is a problem. I'll be talking to the White House about it in terms of like setting new copyright laws. So I'm worried that the AI stuff is going to be used to justify in a case, and we already have a case that's in front of the Supreme Court, that copyright laws are going to get stricter. And then so many of us who find appropriation and you're supposed to recontextualize it,
Right.
to be a
Just
really...
the justices seem to be siding with her,
That is
saying that the screen print does not recontextualize the photograph. Where it's a black and white photograph, and we know what Warhol looks like. I mean, it's not the same thing. And then they're also factoring into the fame aspect of it. They're saying, are we only seeing this as recontextualizing it because Andy Warhol is so iconic that we view this as iconic and hers is more intimate, and we view the iconography as the recontextualization? And if he was less famous, we wouldn't see it this way. So it's going to be to the detriment of less famous artists going forward. He gets away with it, but other people won't get away with it. These are the questions that they're bringing up in the court, which is fascinating questions, but that it's a question at all is so incredible to me. Like the Barack Obama Hope poster is out the window now. That guy lost that case against Shepard Fairey.
Which is also wild. And it's also wild that he felt like he needed to lie in order to try to win that, which is nutty to me. Like, why didn't he just go ahead and say, yeah, I used your photo, it's transformative, go fuck off? I mean,
well, it goes the other way though too. Like you're talking about Warhol's famous so he can get away with it, but it flips too, because you have someone like it could go the other way where she's more famous as a photographer, and so like
she's, my understanding is, I guess she's pretty well known.
Yeah,
like
so then you have a battle
top
of
the
like,
line.
if the fame is kind of the deciding factor, like if I rip off a more famous person, it's bad, but if a famous person rips off me, it's okay. And then you have like this Richard Prince situation where he's printing out screenshots of Instagram that have his comment on it, and that's been judged as enough recontextualization, just a screenshot with his comment. And now we're like reversing all of that, and
they're talking about a century worth of art there that's suspect. I mean, not to be put too fine a point on it, but go back to the Mutt statue.
That's exactly
That is a manufactured.
The argument that the lawyers made to the Supreme Court would basically invalidate that as a piece of art. I can't remember the exact quote that they said, but I said that makes that not a piece of art. Which I think there's too much precedent. Now, of course, I'm not expecting the Supreme Court to have thought, even though they're asking great questions, to have thought deeply about these things. But it's pretty amazing that this is where we're at. And it made me think about society in a whole new way, because it makes me think, do people in the medical field or whatever, when it goes to the Supreme Court, it's like, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. This is everything we do. Like, is that what a lot of things are happening that way? It makes me wonder.
Like where we're the trained experts, and then they're kind of looking at it as, like a generalist having to apply like a general legal standpoint to everything. And it's strange to me that case is regressive, while the technology is pushing the progress, like unbounded progress, versus this regression. And I'm just curious how those two things are going to collide.
It seems like that is the basic tenor of the world. Like we have, like I always think how it's amazing how we have rampant pornography, acceptance of sex work, all this thing, like that, whatever. It's not a moral judgment. I don't care. On the flip side, we've got people saying like, well, if we're having sex in one position and then you switch without asking me just to a different position, that's rape. Like, dude, what the fuck are you watching? What planet are these two things don't
Right.
But at the same
Having
time,
simultaneously.
yeah, you
Yeah,
can go watch an
simultaneous.
interview about like there's a channel I love called Soft White Underbelly, and half the people he interviews are like some kind of deep fetishist. Like, I
It's
mean,
amazing.
like shit where I'm like, what in the hell? And
Well,
weird stuff too. Like I was watching one the other day and they're like, what's your kink? And she's like, I'm a little. What's a little? Oh, well, it's someone who likes to like pretend to be a kid. And it's like, is this always involved sexually? Because like that's weird. Then you have like a pedophile who can't have sex with a kid, but now he can kind of get off with someone who's pretending to be a kid. And she was like, yeah, sometimes it's sexual, but she's like, sometimes I just want to get like some animal crackers in a juice box and like color in a coloring book.
you can do that, sweetie.
And I was like, that's
What's
not a
stopping
fucking
you?
kink. Like I bought some Dunkaroos the other day. Like everyone, every now you get sick and you want to go watch like some Ninja Turtles because you're like, everyone needs that.
So first off, I said sweetie because she's saying that she wants to be a young kid.
Yeah.
Number two, this is quite the analogy that you've created here, Kalyan, and I hope that you take it to the Supreme Court and bring it up to them and invite them to.
Well, it's also amazing that this is such a regressive idea, is the way they're looking at this, and that they're simultaneously doing the same thing to all these other major landmark cases, Roe v. Wade, and everything is being,
Right.
and this seems like a huge reversal
Yeah.
for everything that us three have known our entire lives.
Yeah.
This is outside the bounds of anything I ever imagined would happen.
Well, so if I can leave out on a hopeful note, perhaps the thing that's going to happen is the Supreme Court will make a utterly idiotic, regressive decision based on a Andy Warhol Prince screen print, and that will in turn make AI completely functionless for commercial art, and will neuter it all, and will keep all the people who are making things right now keep on trucking, because anything with a whiff of AI will be completely commercially unfeasible.
Well, what's going to happen is like Kalyan's paintings are going to be plagiarism, but the AI, because there's like an entire industry behind it, will move ahead full speed. Because like already that article with that dude, they're like, well, what about copyright? Can artists opt out? And his response was basically, we've thought about that, but that's really complicated. Motherfucker, you trained a robot to make art, and you can't figure out how someone can write in and say, please make my name not available in your system? Fuck you. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But now, you know, it's Stable Diffusion's open source anyways, so like the guardrails are entirely off, and the child porn's probably already out there, and like all the disgusting things that are going to come out of it are, I'm sure, are happening because people can get on GitHub and reframe any guardrails.
I was thinking about this, what you just said reminded me, I was thinking about this in the context of having this conversation. And one thing that we've seen is that when we were younger, there were certain things that we accepted as like kind of real. And now we're having to question those things. And I think the questions can be fair, like with people transitioning gender, like, okay, can you be born in this body, but as a woman, like all these questions, which we accepted as like complete truths before, and now we're having to question, okay, that's fair. My question is whether in the future, because we're able to live in a world where possibilities to some extent are endless because we're creating the world around us, will all truth and all meaning, will everything be entirely subjective, where people really can say things like, well, like if somebody tells me they're a goat, I can say, well, that's fine, that's what you think, but you can't, I mean, I don't know, it doesn't seem real. Where other people will be like, I'm a goat, and I'll be like, yes.
Sure, you present as a goat with your avatar.
Yeah, nobody can tell me different. You sure?
I think that's always been, and that's why I went with that C.S. Lewis essay, is I think that's always been the goal of mankind. As soon as we got technology, the goal has always been to get to that point of magic, like real magic, where you go, I want to be a fish, and then you're a fish, and like physics don't apply, like, and the kind of end state is like upload into your little God box computer, vanilla Tom Cruise vanilla sky, and you can have the world exactly how you want it, and anytime something goes wrong, you can just have the thought and change it, and it will be like kind of controlling a dream at all times. And that's like the escapist attitude from the trouble of reality, and we've always been aiming towards that. And I think it's the most tempting thing. And it was like you said, there's always this process. It's always the most tempting thing, and it's always the worst for us. Like, or at least it's the worst for the type of creature we are. Now, we may become a different type of creature, you know, like humans may cease to exist and we may be disconnected, you know, digital entities or something like that. But I think it's very strange as a species to be like actively heading towards, I don't, this is where I'm okay with the AI stuff. I don't really have any, like, I don't care if there's humans here 100 years from now or not, you know, like, I really don't.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to be gone at some point. But it's strange to me that as a species, we're kind of actively trying to take ourselves out of the game, because every other species in the world is trying to stay in it. And then the subjective thing really bothers me too, because if everyone has a targeted subjective, like you said, it's not even content anymore, experiences, that takes away any social glue. Like, even the idea that we're all going to not watch the same TV show, that we're just going to get targeted content that's like, well, I'm getting the courtroom drama and you're getting the courtroom drama, but it's made for you. There's no more like talking Seinfeld over the water cooler, and the consequences of that for society are strange for me as well.
Yeah, and that's the way it already is going. Depending on who you talk to, they have an entirely different context for what our society is, which is amazing. I think there was some point where people would say, yeah, I see it this way and you see it this way, and this is a disagreement. Now the disagreement is on what is actually happening. Nobody can agree on what the reality is. And that's a fascinating place to be. And it's only going to get more that way.
Well, and we've seen that, like, with I mean, the best thing I can think of is COVID. Like, how many times were we actively told something was 100% misinformation, and then like 50% of the people were like, that's misinformation, and 50% is like, that's misinformation. And like me and Tori have lived through it a few times now, where the vaccine put her out of commission for 3 months and no one would talk about it. And now that COVID has actually put her out of commission, people will listen, same set of symptoms and everything. And she's starting to find more information that the original reaction, you know, was like something that people with the condition we think she might have now, it's now known that it can cause a flare up of that. But at the time, but they still can't get help. It's like, I have POTS. Vaccines are known to exacerbate POTS, and people are still telling them that's conspiracy. The vaccine doesn't cause reactions. And but like, I live with it in my house. Like, that's the reality I'm facing, is she couldn't do anything for 3 months, and she's been out of commission for a month now. But then the public narrative is like, no, you know, like that's conspiracy. And anyone who was talking about this got kicked off Facebook, got kicked off YouTube. And
did I tell you what happened when I got the vaccine? Did I tell you what happened?
You said your legs weren't working or something.
Yeah, my right hip like was so just stopped working. Like, I couldn't walk. Like, I was commando crawling to the bathroom. It was ridiculous. Like, so it happened at night. I felt, oh, this feels weird. I woke up in the morning. I was a complete cripple. I'm not exaggerating. Went to the urgent care, the emergency room or something, and I'm sitting there treating me like I'm crazy. They're like, and then a doctor came in, and he'd been staying out in the hall, kind of just watching me, like listening. He said, "Did you get the vaccine?" I said, "Yeah, yesterday." He said, "It'll be gone in a week. It's because of the vaccine." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." And then he left. I don't know who he was. I mean, he was a doctor. He didn't sign any papers for me. I was dealing with somebody else entirely. And that's what happened. He told me, yeah, this happens. He said, it's inflammation in your hip due to the vaccine. He said it happens.
A lot of them won't even tell you. And that to me is like the biggest.
I feel so lucky I got that guy. Yeah. Because otherwise I'd have been like, oh my God, what the fuck is this?
and when you hear people, my point is that you'll see people on kind of both sides being like, do your research. And they'll say it to the other side like they're convinced they haven't. Like, people told me that. And it's like, fuck you. I've watched my partner walk around looking like she has Parkinson's for 3 months. Like, what more research do I need to do? But it's coming from both sides, and like that's the disconnect that you're talking about. And I mean, it's pretty obvious. I think it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's on political terms. Everybody has the exact opposite opinion on everything that's going on. And if you meet somebody who's kind of in between, that person's usually a little bit crazy. It's like, I don't know.
But I mean, I think
they're
that's
the
all of us,
outsider.
is we're like these kind of skeptics, and so we're in between. And then you're like, that puts you in the worst position where you're like hated by everybody then.
Yeah.
Like, it's really strange. It's a really strange. And
I
yeah,
think it's pretty much like I'm pretty sure. I think it's pretty much accepted that Biden is a little bit senile or something now. But when he was first elected, like the people who voted for him, which I can't remember if I voted this time. If I did, I probably would have voted for him because I ain't voting for Trump, probably, right? But he was going too far.
I like that you don't even remember.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So but Trump, like I would say, yeah, Trump, he's a real lunatic. Like he's so crazy. Like I think he's hilarious, which people can't on the left can't even accept that Trump is hilarious. Like everything he says is the funniest thing I ever read, because it's just so unlikely that a person who's president would be saying any of these things.
Yeah.
That's what's funny, is the context. It's like a guy sitting on his lawn, like you just accept, oh, yeah, that guy's crazy. But he's the president, like he gets to say like whatever he wants. But then there's also some truth to some of the things he's saying, but that's lost. And then you get like, and I would say, and I think Biden's a little senile. I would say these things about Trump, and they would be like, yeah, he's the worst. I'd say, yeah, well, I think Biden is a little senile. They'd be like, yeah, how can you say that about him? I mean, he can't even talk. Like, you haven't heard him? I was like, dude, he can't talk. And now I think everybody knows, like, yeah, he really kind of can't talk. Like there's something wrong there. But in the beginning, it was like people couldn't accept what they were seeing because it was a binary. Like you love and you hate.
You feel the need to entrench, in your camp. You've got a hole up in your camp, and I mean, I'm hoping that some of that is getting relieved a little bit, but who knows where that.
I think the AI thing is going to, just like we were saying, it's going to increase it.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Like it's going to be 6 hours before an election, and someone's going to drop like AI generated image of the next presidential candidate getting a blowjob from a 5-year-old. And that's going to skew a bunch of votes. And then, it will take a day to say that it was, someone will be able to prove it's generated by an AI or something. But I mean, I'm intentionally using a gross extreme example because it's possible. And that kind of thing could really, really skew, I mean, that's deep fake stuff is not going to be, it's not going to be good.
It begs the question whether I mean, in the end, reality is going to matter because we're all going to die one way or the other. And eventually, as a species, it's all going to become extinct. So in the end, reality is going to win this battle. But in the context of the society we've created, it begs the question. Now, for me, growing up in the way that I have, and I think for the both of you, reality, like there is something that's true and that's important, but it actually makes me wonder whether in the future, and it's already starting to happen a little, that'll cease to matter at all. There is no truth. It totally doesn't matter. It's completely whatever you want. Underneath it, somebody has to be programming the thing and building the stuff and everything. Somebody has to be thinking somewhat logically, but when we go home and we're just in our house, are we going to have any kind of semblance of truth? Is school going to matter, or is anything going to matter? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a really good movie. I just watched it again. It's got Robin Wright in it. Oh, and it's like an animation, and it shows that world, and it really it's the type of science fiction that puts me at like, this as far as humans will ever be able to imagine, because there's a certain state, and I think I've seen this in sci-fi, where I haven't really encountered a new idea in sci-fi in a while, like I feel like you can go back a ways, and you're talking about nanotechnology and AI and robots and all of that, and uploading to the computers. And it's called the Congress,
Oh, I haven't
2013.
seen
So
that.
they scan her. She's playing herself, an actress who's no longer getting jobs, and so she signs a contract where she can be scanned, and then they can make movies using like the
Oh,
scan of her.
yeah.
And
Didn't
then
somebody do that recently?
probably
Maybe I feel like it was Bruce Willis, but maybe
it
I'm
wouldn't
wrong.
surprise me. But anyways, then that avatar kind of gains consciousness and comes to life in the movie, and it switches into animation, and everyone's constantly kind of morphable, like their avatar is constantly morphable. And I just feel like that and a lot of other stories are at the point where like we won't be able to imagine beyond that, because we don't exist and we can't exist as humans. Like, and I feel like we've butted up against that in our fiction for a while, and we're getting to the point, because what you're talking about is a world that's just so unhinged. Like, that's all you can say about it, is you can do anything you want at any time, and like that's kind of the end of it. There's no next progression. But I think those people will suffer, or anyone who goes that way is going to suffer, like the disconnect from reality. Like, because when you're in there, like you're going to be in your little God box that can do whatever you want. What happens when that thing gets hacked?
Yeah.
And you're just stuck like in an episode of Fear Factor with eating bugs for the rest of your life in your little, so I think that's going to be, and that's what the abolition of man is about, is like when you reach that point, that's the point you lose. When you finally get what you were striving for, you've just entered the most nightmare situation possible. And that's why I'm tempted to follow Sean out into the woods and, be the ant.
I haven't done it yet, but
selfish sake.
I definitely have moved closer to it over the past couple months, but we will see. We should probably end it there with the most hopeful thing that we said so far.
Move to the woods.
Retreat. Retreat.
Make real trainings. Make a broom out of the sticks in your backyard. Get some dirt on your hands. Get some microbes in you, getting feeling good.
Go and sniff that oil paint thinner.
It's funny. I'll say this as the last thing. The one thing I've always wondered, what would I do when I retire? Because I don't intend to do art for the rest of my life. I'm not that guy. I think I'm going to actually be a gardener. I don't have much experience gardening, but I feel like I'd be really good at it. I do stuff in my own yard. I grew up around it. And I guess it goes back to the comment you made earlier, that that's what the tech billionaires do. They get their hands dirty. And maybe that's the secret of all of this stuff. Like, that's what's real.
I don't think that there's any coincidence that the time that I was, fantasizing about building statues to pop culture icons, was shortly after having lived in a dorm and had a hellish college experience, and then went to doing temp jobs where I unloaded trucks all day, had the body of a Greek god, and wrote a song a week in my head while I was, lifting thousands of pounds worth of garbage.
in a quote miserable job, right? Like,
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. I should post some pictures on my OnlyFans.
Well, Kalyan, before you retire, what are you working on now, and like, what can people follow up with you on?
Actually, I have a NFT drop of serial killer action figures coming up. So I think it'll be on Halloween or Halloween or the day after. I haven't decided. I just wrote the flyer. It says, sometimes you have to look to the worst of us to find out what's best in us. You found hours of inspiration binge watching serial killer content. Now take the next step and own the figures. Each character provides positive motivational quotes for when you need them most. Like Eileen Warno says things like, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. Like all that kind of Instagram stuff.
Are these cool and real quotes that the peoples have given in interviews?
No. No, these are things that I found from I Googled inspirational things to write in my Instagram feed and stuff like that. So then, so whether you're cool and confident like Ted Bundy, or shy like Jeffrey Dahmer, little quirky like John Wayne Gacy, or strong like Eileen Wuornos, Serial Killers, that's the name of the drop, Serial Killers has a role model for you. Remember, it's not what you do, it's what you say that matters. Serial Killers has role models for the 21st century. We already know their flaws, so we can't tear them down. All we can do is admire them for living their truth.
Yeah. I bet if you went to their interviews, you would find quotable inspiration. Like
Oh yeah.
like
They say
Manson
great
is
shit.
full of
Yeah.
all kinds of it.
Yeah.
And what is interesting when you watch those guys get interviewed, you'll watch the interviewer try and stuff them into the image that they
Can't be
want to
done.
be, and they always resist it. And they're always telling him, they say, see, like, this is why I did it, because you motherfuckers like are trying to control who I am, and I'm proving that you can't control me. And then the interviewers are just like, well, you're a fucking psychopath. And it's like, no, he really actually just called you out. Like, he really proved a point. You know, it's just not a point we all need to follow up on.
Other than that, I'm working on my final series of paintings that I told you guys about, and that's my best work to date by far. It's not even close. I'm exceeding my own. It's rare that an artist surprises themselves, but I'm pacing myself and I'm putting myself so far to my comfort zone that I'm surprising myself. I'm really enjoying the work. So I'm gonna have it be 25 paintings. It's gonna be my final series, and I think I have 9 done. So yeah, those are the 2 major projects, and then the AI thing, making myself into AI. So
Fantastic.
I'm gonna play with that one, because I look at Kalyan's paintings and I go, I probably could do that, but I'm way too fucking lazy.
But do I want to spend 3 months on that? No, I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, thanks so much, Kalyan, for joining us. You were like immediately one of the guys that I was like, I got to talk to him about it. Just the way you process the world is so careful, and slow. Like you were like, oh, I can't talk to you about that yet. Like when I first asked, you like had to go.
It was overwhelming.
Well,
it was like entering a new dimension, and you're just like, yeah.
But really, really appreciate it, because you were, you know, the couple people that we're talking to are like the people that I really wanted to get their opinion. So
yeah,
dude, I really love what you guys are doing, and I'm really glad also that you're getting publicity and credit for this, because you really deserve it. It's a really interesting project. The stories are good. The artwork is exactly what it is. But then there's a greater concept, which you guys are handling in so many different ways. So it deserves everything you guys have coming to it. I hope you guys win Eisner Awards. I don't know what can happen from this, but I hope you go all the way. I don't know. It's awesome.
Thanks,
man. And thanks for talking to us. Appreciate it. And thanks for watching, guys. I hope you made it all the way through. And special shout out to anybody watching it at double speed. Good job.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.